Welcome everyone. It has been a while since I've gotten out on the bike and recorded something, so this is pretty exciting. I am out on my CRF300L Rally, and I am in eastern Oklahoma. I'm about to ride through some of the mountains out here, and I won't hit the Tallahassee Scenic Drive, but I'll be on the highway that leads to it, which is also pretty curvy. So it's a great little route, not super long, lots of turns. It's really fun, so I'm excited. I am riding the CRF300 from Northwest Arkansas to Dallas right now, about a 4.5 hour trip. So I want to make another video at some point about interstate travel on the CRF, because it can do it, and it can actually handle it, and I want to make a video about that, so keep your eyes out for that. But the big deal for this first ride is, this is the first ride that I have done on the bike since I did K-Tech front spring and K-Tech rear spring. And I wanted to get an idea of some of the road manners with the springs swapped out. So I think coming out here and riding some of these twisties is a great way to do that. So yes, you heard that correctly. I said K-Tech front spring and rear spring. I did not replace the rear shock with the K-Tech shock, and I know a lot of people do that. It's about, I don't know, like $500-ish. They do sell just the shock spring though, and that's what I wanted to try out. But stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, because I didn't just change out the shock spring on the rear shock. It is still the OEM shock, but I did some other stuff to it, and I'm making a video about that, and I hope that will save owners of the CRF300L some money, because you don't absolutely have to buy a brand new shock for this bike. The OEM shock is salvageable, so I'm making a video about that. Stay tuned, subscribe, and you'll see that coming up shortly. But so far, I've been on the highway for about an hour and a half with the new suspension. And honestly, it feels pretty close to stock. It's maybe slightly harsher, but that's to be expected because the stock suspension is so soft. So far, impressions are good though. With the stock suspension in corners, at my weight, I'm slightly over 200 pounds. In corners with the stock suspension, it was so soft, it just felt like the moment I leaned over and started giving it the beans, the suspension just fell flat. It wallowed, it wasn't very precise, it didn't feel planted at all. And it just wasn't very fun to ride in, fast turns. So immediately, something that I noticed with the stiffer suspension is that the bike just feels more composed. It doesn't feel like, it's just bouncing all over the place, front and rear. So that has helped my confidence already, taking this bike fast in corners. Just it feeling more composed from the stiffer springs. It's really beautiful out here. Now, of course, when I pulled over to get all my cameras set up, the mount for my GoPro snapped, so I had to use a different mount, so I hope this footage is still at a good angle. We'll see, I guess, in post-production. But this is also the first ride with the new Insta camera, so that's exciting. Having that third-person view is really cool, and I'm really excited to start making more videos using that camera. This whole ride is just a lot of firsts. I will say, it feels like the Insta camera is like super low. I mounted it super high, and the mount just kind of, it didn't cinch. I tightened it down really tight, but it still swiveled down to where it's pretty low now. So let's see what to do about that. I feel like it needs like 2 mounting points for it to really be stable. Just a bunch of motorcyclists coming through here. I always love seeing that out in the middle of nowhere like this. All the locals know the good routes to ride. the bike feels so much just more composed in these long sweeping turns than it did before. Also, I'm taking these right corners kind of easy because I don't want my camera to hit the ground. I don't want to lean too far over. I'm going to drop into fifth. It's having a little trouble getting up these hills. Oh, what a nice sweeping turn. Beautiful. Oh, this bike feels so great. So great. So wonderful. And this is such a nice place to ride, too. Talimena Scenic Drive. I'm not going to be hitting the drive today, but let's go over in the shade. Well, there she is. Great bike. So the K-Tech spring kit is just a new main spring that goes in this fork right here. It's just a thicker spring, thicker steel, so it's a higher spring rate than the stock. And then the K-Tech shock spring, you can see it down in there. It is the stock shock. I have another video going into a lot of the changes that I made on that to make that salvageable, but it worked. I'm pretty excited about that. Man, what a cool bike. I love this thing. All right, so one of the things that I noticed with the K-Tech suspension is that I used their spring rate calculator on their website. You put in your weight, and then K-Tech will tell you what spring they think you need. So I went based off of their calculator. But one thing I noticed when I was looking at suspension options from other companies is that the K-Tech spring rates were lower than a lot of the other companies. So like Race Tech and Rally Raid both recommended a higher spring rate for my weight, which I found interesting. And I've thought about that, and I think here is the deal with the K-Tech stuff. So I think the K-Tech springs are marketed more towards beginner dual sport riders who actually would benefit from a softer spring rate. Rally Raid and Race Tech are quite a bit more money, and naturally, because they cost so much more, they're going to be marketed towards people who can afford that, which means people who are serious about riding. Well, I shouldn't say that, not serious, but people who are more into doing serious riding with this kind of bike. The K-Tech suspension is I think the cheapest, if not the cheapest, one of the cheapest options for the CRF300. And I think a lot of the more beginner riders that pick up this bike are going to be looking at cheaper options because someone who's new to dual sporting doesn't want to drop $1,500 on Rally Raid or Race Tech suspension with a replacement shock and all that stuff. They just want the bike to be a little more composed for their weight and to not just sag terribly when they sit on it. So I think my point is that the K-Tech stuff is softer per your weight by their recommendation than other brands, because they know that beginners are going to buy their springs, and they don't want to scare the beginners away or make them think that they went too stiff. So I think that's kind of why the K-Tech suspension is a little softer than some of the other manufacturers' recommendations. All of that being said, I think that the K-Tech recommendations are actually pretty good. Like, one of the things I liked about the stock suspension, even at 200 pounds body weight, I think the stock suspension was super comfortable. You know, it just kind of soaked up everything, which was awesome. I didn't like how it was so uncomposed in turns, and I think off-road it would get overwhelmed pretty quickly for my weight, but it was comfortable, and I think K-Tech actually kind of did the smart thing by recommending lighter spring rates to beginner dual sport riders. So these new springs are stiffer and they hold my weight better, but they still maintain a lot of the comfort that the stock springs did. You know, you feel a little bit more, but overall, you know, it's still pretty plush, which I think was the right move. You know, Honda really should have just put these springs in the bike to begin with. I think a lot more people in the US would have been completely fine with the stock suspension, and the reviewers wouldn't have just raked Honda over the coals for putting such soft suspension on this bike. I think if they had just upped the spring rate a little bit, I think that, you know, we would see like half the number of complaints about the suspension. Yeah, it's not adjustable or, you know, anything like that, but whatever. I mean, it's a CRF300, it's a beginner dual sport bike that can be upgraded to be something better. And I also think that's part of the fun in getting bikes like this, is upgrading. But, you know, I don't know. Honda should have put stiffer springs, but overall, I mean, solid bike, even with the soft suspension stock. And K-Tech, I think you did a good job on choosing your spring rates. I think it'll make a lot of beginner dual sport riders very happy with their purchase of your springs. Alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed following along with me today. I've got another 3 or 4 hours to go on the highway. I'm really enjoying the new springs and this bike in general. If you like this kind of stuff, subscribe. I have a new video coming out soon that's going to be about what I did to the rear shock on this bike to salvage the OEM shock. So definitely keep your eyes out for that. I think it's pretty informative, and the stock shock is not garbage. Don't rush out and waste too much money replacing it. There's other things you can do. So keep your eyes out for that. I do this trip back and forth from Arkansas to Dallas pretty often. So I'm going to make a video about interstate travel on this bike for sure, because I have some thoughts on doing it a lot. Yeah. I'm really loving this. I hope y'all get out there and ride. And it's a beautiful day, and thank you guys for watching today. I'll see y'all on the next